All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope everything's going to work tonight for us. Uh, we're doing yesterday's show today, as I was sick yesterday. Plus, there was a thunderstorm, and I had to be with my kid. Um, I have a backlog of stories and things that I need to do and get to. Sadly, and hard for me to do this way. Now, the stories that I have here tonight, just a few. For some reason, I felt they were important. A few of them I wrote through interviews before, and I think I've posted one or two on Paranoid Times before, or maybe I posted it on Reddit and some other places. But these were some interesting things that I thought I'd go into. I got to thinking about. As we progress there, and there'll be some other stuff that we discuss. For those of you who want to know, Tuck is not here tonight. This is one of those shows that doesn't need a lot of commentary and other things. He will be with us tomorrow. As I said, I'm doing yesterday's show tonight. I wish it was the other way around. I wish I was ahead. I'm still way behind stuff I need to do. And I try to do the most important stuff to begin with, but I like to toss this fun stuff in there along the way. But some of you might remember the conversations that I had about the story I told about the tick virus and the cows and other stuff that's going on. Now, that ain't what tonight's show's about. But there's been some other developments in that case, some broader developments that add to the framework of it. And I think I'll talk about them tomorrow. My name's Denny. And Denny's my guy that runs Paranoid Times. Tuck is the other guy. Now, I want you to think about how big the world is. We have a habit of saying we live in a small world. We have a habit of talking with somebody and discussing things and whatever. And say, oh, that happened to you too. It's such a small world. But in reality, we live in a massive world. A lot of my stories tend to revolve around the United States. That's because I'm in the United States. You know, if I lived in the UK or if I lived in Australia, I would talk about those places probably. And there's interesting stuff that goes on there. But right now, for the most part, the stories that we're discussing tonight happen within the United States. Our first one takes us to a place called Hungry Horse, Wyoming. Now, years ago, many years ago, I had a session with Yellowstone. I interviewed people. I spoke to them. I found out things out there that disturbed me. It is a very active place. And volcanically, it is a supervolcano. It could destroy much of the United States. And things go disappearing out there all the time. That's what happened to Hungry Horse. Now, this is the gentleman that I spoke with's own words. He says, I must be going crazy. I can see a town that doesn't exist. And the people in it were wearing the skins like a coat that doesn't fit anymore. They were drooping down their bodies. You know how it is when you get old? And your skin starts to sag a little bit. His name, where he says here, was Samuel Baker. He is a Yellowstone National Park Ranger. He come to the internet one night asking for advice. Mind you, he asked in some of the wrong places. If you were to contact Yellowstone today, you will find a Samuel Baker. Now he said, his word, I spent my entire career fighting wildfires for the National Park Service. And after 2 decades in the field, I thought I'd seen everything this wilderness could do to a body. Frostbite, animal maulings, a man who fell 40 feet onto a rock shelf and lived just long enough to ask if his legs were still attached. Then, about 4 hours ago, an entire town appeared in the middle of Yellowstone. And the other ranger and I are the only ones who walked its streets and come back out the same shape we went in. We're not alone in it, which you think would be the strangest part of the town materializing out of nowhere, instead of one's inside of one's of America's most famous parks. It's not. The town is full of people, some of whom have apparently lived there for years. There's not supposed to be a town in the middle of Yellowstone, if you're wondering. They look normal at a glance. It's only when you watch them for long enough, watch the way their jaw works, a half second out of sync with the words coming out of it, or the way a hand holding a cup of coffee has more joints, too many in their fingers. That's the wrongness. That's when the wrongness starts to surface, like something rising under ice. My buddy was the first to see it. He'd driven into the valley before dawn and found a brand new sign on the road. Welcome to Hungry Horse. Around the next bend, a motel. And that's when he came back for me. We took a long way up the mountain in the Blazer, parked at the base, and hiked the rest of the way. We crossed the railroad tracks and passed a gas station with one old drum of diesel and another of water. The water drum sweating despite it being cold, like it was looking or running a fever. The street was lined with cars. Some looked decades rusted, others still had dealer parts and plates and plastic films on the seat. And through the windshields of one, I could see a fine web of something pale and fibrous threaded across the dashboards, like mold that had learned to grow in straight lines. Hungry Horse wasn't abandoned. It was thriving in the way a wound would thrive. We went in cautious. Nobody bothered us. Most people ignored us outright. The way you would ignore a draft. But a few turned to watch us pass. In turn, they beat too far, necks rotating past the point where necks should stop. before some unseen mechanism caught them and brought them back around. Some of these people looked familiar, I said. Thomas nodded slowly, like his head had got heavier in the last 10 minutes. I recognized a couple in that diner, too. One of them was missing a finger, and now she's not. I watched the man carry a bucket down the sidewalk, walking with total confidence, never once looking down at his feet. Which was for the best, because below the ankle of his gait didn't match his stride. His feet were landing wrong, rolling at the angle no foot should roll at, like the bones inside had been rearranged, and only the skin remembers the old way of walking. He turned the corner, and I caught another man staring at me from the coffee shop doorway. Tall, thin, bald. Skin the color of something keeping too long out in the sun. Almost like jerky. This was Yellowstone, after all. Yellowstone made men hard. Yellowstone hurt people. It's a rough and dangerous place. But here, in the middle of Yellowstone, was a town. A town full of people. Strange people. But a town full of people. Now, he went on to say, the skin looked wrong in a way I couldn't place it, until I noticed his chest rising and falling on a rhythm that didn't match his throat. Like he was breathing through two different sets of lungs that hadn't been told about the other one. He looked like the missing hiker we pulled out of the ravine the week before. We zipped that hiker into a bag ourselves. That's when it clicked. Why so many faces here felt familiar? They were the missing. Every one of them vanished from some trailhead or campsite or backcountry permit log. Now standing in Hungry Horse, with their bodies very slightly, very wrongly reassembled. What I'm saying here is that the people who went missing in Yellowstone over the years, the pictures and the posters, people who fell in hot springs, the people who took the wrong trail, the people who thought they were eaten by bears. These were the people that were missing. But they weren't normal. We talked to everyone who talked to us. Most were friendly. None of them knew why they were there. As far as they were concerned, they lived in Hungry Horse, Montana. I meant Montana, not Wyoming. And had for many years. Though none could exactly say how many. And when they tried to count, something in their face would go briefly slack. A puppet whose strings had been set down for a second too long before the smile snapped back in place. An elderly woman told us she worked at the hardware store for 45 years. When she said when she said her mouth kept moving for half a second after the seconds ended. Like there was more being said underneath that hadn't made it into sound yet. I asked, did you have a family? A husband? Children? She shook her head. In her head kept a faint, wet rotation, going for a moment after the shake would have stopped. The way a stuck bell keeps ringing. I've never married, she says. This is my home. My family's right here. When she smiled, I saw that her back teeth weren't teeth at all anymore, but something smoother, paler, fused together like the lining of a shell. We thanked her, left, and drove deeper into the town. My buddy had gone quiet. He spoke up. He said, I don't like this, Sammy. His voice came out flatter than usual, like it was being filtered through something. I felt watched this since we crossed the tracks of Hungry Horse. He then went on to say, and there's something wrong with my hands. He held them up. Nothing visibly wrong, I could see. And that's what the problem was. They moved a fraction of a second behind his intention. Like he was operating them by remote control through a delay that was only just starting to show. I looked past him at a man by a semi-trailer outside the diner, holding a jug of milk that had gone to the color of old bone curds, suspended in the shape too symmetrical to even be natural. And the man's throat worked in a slow, swallowing rhythm, even though he wasn't drinking anything. Like his whole body had been left running on a loop that no longer matched what his hands were doing. Sam, my buddy's voice cracked. Are you listening to me? I snapped back. Yes. What? Sorry. I said we need to leave. He was shaking now, properly. And under his jacket sleeve, I caught a glimpse of skin gone to the texture of wax. Left too near flame, not burned. Just softened. Slumping by a degree's worth of whatever was underneath. I don't want to be here when whatever's happening to them finishes happening. I looked around at all of them, so many people who shouldn't exist, going through the motions that almost match being alive. Let's go, he says. We drove back to the ranger cabin in silence. My buddy wouldn't stop looking at his hands. I'm calling this in, he said. I don't care how it sounds. A town full of missing just appeared in Yellowstone. And something is finishing the job on all of them. I nodded and sat back down, alone, trying to process it. I kept seeing the hiker, the real one. The one we zipped into the bag. And then the one standing in the doorway 4 hours ago, breathing on two rhythms, very much upright. I thought about how long a body takes to stop looking like a body and starts looking like somebody's wearing one. There was a knock at the door. I whispered, come in. Two men in black suits stepped inside. One had a badge on his chest and a gun on his hip. And one, disorderly second, I watched his throat work. That same cold double rhythm I had seen the man that drinks with the milk jug. These had to be people from there. Before deciding, it was just my nerves. They said, "Are you in charge here?" I nodded. I didn't know if I believed it. What the hell do I do? In a few days, I'll read you the rest of that story. But I wanted to leave it with you. I wanted you to think about it. But yes, I saw some questions up here. Is this the horror show? Kinda, sorta. Is I don't know. Probably, who knows? But anyway, sorry I wasn't able to say hi to you guys as y'all entered. I was locked in on that story. And as I said, in case you missed it, in case that you didn't go back or whatever, this is a story about vanishing towns. I've either posted about them before or received updates. This one, I particularly received an update. In some form or some context, I have posted them online. I think. I posted a lot of stuff online when I was going crazy. But, yeah, thank you. But yeah, Tuck's not here tonight. It just wasn't one of them shows where you needed two people. He'll be with us tomorrow, I think. We're doing yesterday's show tonight. I'm not going to block you. You know what? I checked. You've been a member of Paranoid Times for 5 years, Misty. Did you know that? You're one of the early ones. Well, mid to early. You can come in, I think it was 5 years. Anyway. I said it was a horror show the other day. This was technically, there's a lot of you really need to break down horror. Horror shows are, there might be some horror aspect about it. Maybe body horror, maybe creepy feelings or something like that. There are certain aspects that rattle the cage of the human psyche. By the way, I hope everybody's doing good tonight. I do. And thank you guys for keeping and coming back and indulging me as I work on various things, including myself. Now, the next one takes us to Ashley, Kansas. Now, I know you've heard a rumor about this somewhere. Somebody posted it. Someone talked about it. I didn't even think it was on TV. Sometime during the night of August 6th, 1952, the small town of Ashley, Kansas, ceased to exist. At 3:28 a.m. on August 17th, 1952, A magnitude 7.9 earthquake was measured by the United States Geological Survey. The epicenter was determined to be directly beneath Ashley. When state law enforcement arrived at what they should have been the outskirts of a farming community, they found a smoldering fissure in the earth measuring 1,000 yards in length and approximately 500 yards in width. Its edges fused into something closer to glass than soil, as the ground itself had been opened by a heat with no source. The depth of the fissure has never been determined. Sounding lines were lowered into it and returned without any resistance and without end. After 12 days, the search for the missing 679 residents of Ashley was called off by the Kansas state government at 9:15 p.m. on August 29th of 1952. All 679 were presumed dead. At 2:27 a.m. on August 30th, a magnitude 7.5 earthquake was measured, with its epicenter at the same location. When law enforcement came back to investigate at 5:32 a.m., the fissure had closed, not collapsed, not filled, but closed. The seam in the prairie had healed over like a wound drawing its lips shut. What follows is a record of the 8 days preceding the disappearance, compiled from the call logs of the Hays Police Department. On the evening of August 8th, 1952, at 7:13 p.m., a resident named Gabriel Jonathan reported a strange sight in the sky just above Ashley. A small black opening, edged faintly, a color none of the witnesses could later agree on. Several insisting it was a color that wasn't really there at all. Within 15 minutes, the Hays station had logged dozens of identical reports. The phenomenon was never observed by any neighboring communities. Although the sky over Ashley alone had developed a terror above it, I guess you would say. And the rest of the sky had simply declined not to notice. At 7:54 a.m. on August 9th, Officer Alan Mace radioed that he had become lost on a single road in Ashley, a road that, by his account, never curved or bent, and yet returned him to Hays regardless of how far or how straight he drove on it. Several additional patrol cars confirmed the same road's impossibility through the morning. The road continued to exist, continued to be a road, and continued to lead nowhere it should. Witnesses who attempted to drive on foot reported a sensation of their own bodies stretching thin, partly along the route, a feeling of being drawn out longer than a person should be drawn, before snapping back to ordinary proportions that moment. Hays come back into view. At 8:17 p.m., Kaner reported the Milton family missing after they attempted to leave town by car. They were never seen on the road by anyone in Hayes. On the morning of August 10th, callers reported that the sun had never risen over Ashley. At 10:15 a.m., a helicopter dispatched from Topeka flew the coordinates and found nothing below but unbroken dark, no town, no fields, no fisher, no light, as if the helicopter had passed over a place with an absence shaped like one. At 12:43 p.m. on August 11th, a woman called to report that her daughter, Erica, had begun speaking with her father, who had been dead 3 years in a drunk driving accident, and was now trying to go outside to join them. Over the next 12 hours, 329 additional calls described the same affliction spreading through every child in the town. A fixed, glassy attentiveness directed at something in the dark, and a shared, repeated phrase, reporting independently by dozens of unconnected households, that the dark wasn't empty, it was full, and it was patient, and it loved them very much. By the morning of August 12th, all 217 children of Ashley had vanished in the night. 421 calls came in. Several callers described finding their children's bed occupied by something that was, for a few disorientating seconds, before recognition finally failed entirely, almost the shape of a sleeping child. A shape with too many points of movement between the blanket, joints answering to no skeleton a child should own. Before, whatever lay there seemed to notice it was being observed, and came apart into something that retreated under the floorboards with a sound like a wet rope. At 5:19 on August 13th, an elderly resident named Scott Luntz reported a fire to the south, one that did not behave like fire. It bled upward into the black opening rather than rising from any visible source, painting in the sky red and orange from a wound rather than a blaze. Through the rest of the day, callers insisted the fire was not approaching the town, but emerging from outside of the dark itself, as though the opening in the sky had begun to pulsate. The reports continued until 12:09 a.m. on August 14th. The final call before a day and a half of silence was placed by Mr. Benjamin Edicott. This is the phone call placed by Benjamin. Benjamin, just hold on, wait. Yeah, I see something. It's to the south. It looks like its arms are on the wrong sides of it. Phone call hangs up. The next call will not come until the following evening. What followed is a complete transcription of the final calls received by the Hays Police Department of Ashley, Kansas, placed on 9:46 p.m. on August 15, 1952. The officers on duty was Peter Welsh. The caller was identified as Mrs. April Foster. Officer, Hays Police Department. He goes on to say hello. Foster says, yes, hello. Ma'am, who am I speaking with? My name is April Foster. She coughs. Please, sir, please help me. What's happening, ma'am? Last night, they came back. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to be. Last night, they came back, she cries. Ma'am, calm down. Speak clearly. Who came back? Everyone. He asked the question himself. Everyone. They came back in the fire. And the fire put them together wrong. My son. I saw my son last night walking down the street. He was burned. But he was also, sir, he was also smiling with a mouth that went all the way around, like something had tried to remember what a smile was like and got the measurements wrong. Ma'am, April went on to say he died last year. I raised him myself, just me and him. I told him to watch for cars on his bike. He never listened. And last night, he was outside calling for me with a voice coming from somewhere in his chest, not his throat. Because his throat was just open. Just open, sir. Like a second mouth that never closed all the way. The officer says, ma'am, none of this is making any sense. You said everyone come back. Foster, are you listening to me? Everyone. Everyone who died. Everyone who went missing, they're back. And they're not finished. Whatever brought them back is still working on them. I watched the man I used to buy eggs from fold himself in half at the waist to fit through his own front door. And he didn't even seem to notice his spine had let him do it. She cries. My boy stood in our yard and said, Mommy, I'm okay now. See? I can walk again. And when he walked toward the porch, like, I saw that his legs were bending at a second knee that shouldn't be there. Like something had added a joint to be helpful. Ma'am, where are you now? Are you safe? I'm hiding. Everyone left alive is hiding. We watched them come up through the fields, dozens of them, more behind. And some people, God help them, some people opened the doors. The screaming didn't last as long as you'd think. Their houses caught fire from the inside and just folded down to the ground. Neat as a tent being struck. Like the earth was tidying up after itself. I have the curtains drawn. I'm in the closet and... Ma'am, is everything all right? Are you there? Ma'am? Glass breaks. Oh my God, she says. The officer goes on to say, Ma'am. She responds, something just came in. I can hear it. Deciding which room. Officer. Stay as quiet as you can and don't make a sound. Foster. In the background, you hear a boy's voice. Mommy, mommy. Sobbing. She whispers, that's not his voice anymore. It's got its voice inside a bigger one. Like he's just the part of it that learned to talk. The officer says, stay still, don't move. Mommy, where are you hiding? I miss you so much, Mommy. I came such a long way to bring you back. I brought so much of myself back for you. The officer tells the woman to stay quiet. You hear heavy footsteps fall, laughter. Layered as several throats were laughing. Slightly out of time with another. You hear a muffled sound that says, I found you, Mommy. Screaming, and beneath it, a very low, a very brief, vast, satisfied sound, like something enormous exhaling. That was the end of the phone call. The following morning at 6:55 a.m., the officers had received many of those calls. Officers of the Hayes Police Department arrived at the location of Ashley, Kansas. A smoldering, burning fissure in the earth was all that remained. And for less than a second, in the smoke rising off of it, more than one officer independently reported seeing a shape too large and too jointed to had come from anything that once lived in a small Kansas farming town, withdrawing downward into the dark, taking its returned children home. I think about Ashley a lot. I don't know why. The next town we're going to visit is Deepwood. When I was a kid, my dad traveled a lot for work. Back then, his company was growing fast. And he was sent around the company to oversee the opening of new stores. In 2002, he had a particular busy year, and it was assigned a longer stint in Pennsylvania. Since it was summer, he brought my mom and me along. Now, I want some of you to understand that Pennsylvania, if you've never been, the underground is riddled with tunnels and coal mines, and there's a guy you can go watch on YouTube. It's goes and explores various parts of Pennsylvania. He's been all over the place. I don't recommend anybody going down in there. I mean, the caves are unsteady, but there's cities upon cities upon cities down there. They were given a fully furnished house in the suburbs for 2 months. 2 stories. And the end of a lonely cul-de-sac. In a town of a little over 3,000 people. The development, Longwood, had only just begun cutting into the forest around it. And most of the houses still stood empty. Windows dark, giving the whole street the feel of a mouth with half its teeth missing. I found a friend my age, Jamie, and we spent the summer the way bored 12-year-olds do, bike trails, the woods. One dead Sunday at the town museum, where I overheard another kid ask an employee about the lost town. The woman laughed. It off as a legend. That was enough. It took 5 weeks before I got anything resembling an answer. And even then, it came sideways. The way these things always do. My friend was the one who found out. Late one afternoon, while we built a bike ramp over a narrow street, watching a pack of teenagers head into the woods with flashlights and beer. He elbows me, laughing. He says, "They're looking for the lost town." Inside, like the words cost him something. The stories say Middlebrook had a sister town out here somewhere. He went on, walking his bike down a path while I followed. And then about 150 years ago, the whole thing just disappeared. People left, or died, or nobody remembers which. Nobody even remembers the name. Kids go looking for it, like it's a rite of passage. I speak up and says, "We should." He says, "No." A kid went looking for it in the 70s and didn't come back. They found him 10 years later, way out in the middle of nowhere. And what they found to him didn't look like it had spent 10 years just laying in the dirt the same way. It should have. Everything out there looks the same. People get turned around. I told him we have GPS now. That we were a different generation. And he looked at me like the word itself was foreign to him, sheltered, born, and raised here. The legend already in his blood before he could walk. He had to get home for a movie with his dad. We rode back in silence until I remembered to ask, crossing the old half-buried train tracks, "Has anyone actually found anything?" My friend's brother said he found bones out there once, but nobody believes him. Where do people usually look? The lake, mostly. He pointed left, toward the teenagers had gone. Figured it was where they were going, or the town was near water. "I'd follow the tracks instead," he says. Why else would they lay them going back into the woods? I considered, yeah, I guess. Nobody goes that way, though. That's the way the kid went. I wasn't swayed. I didn't bring it up again for 2 weeks. Until the weekend before we were due to leave. During a barbecue my parents threw for the new store staff, Jamie and I, hidden inside playing with my N64. The way kids do when there's an unspoken thing between them that nobody's brave enough to name, and there's only 5 days left to name it in. I was embarrassed. Now to say what my real motive was. I had spent every morning that week in that library hunting for anything on that lost town and found nothing. But legends don't come from nowhere. I was sure of that. The way you're sure of things at 12. And I knew if I could make my friend want to impress me, I'd make him take me. I'd already packed a bag, water, flashlight, camera a can of red spray paint in case we needed to mark our way back to the tracks. I thought I was clever. None of it mattered in the end. I was a fool. And I didn't understand yet what kind of fool. I said, "Do you want to go back out in the woods one last time?" He lit up and then caught himself and looked at the floor instead. "Yeah, if you want." We ran out the front door, hand in hand. And a good way into the trees he stopped, rubbing the back of his neck. And he told me that he would miss me. I guess I'd miss him too. We talked for a while after. We kept walking. I seemed to be steering us without seeming to, until he tripped over a rail and had noticed the backpack and looked at me like I'd hit him. He snaps, "You can't be serious." I talked him into it. 2 hours max. Follow the tracks, turn around after one. He agreed with a sigh that I now understand in hindsight. There's a door opening somewhere it shouldn't have. We talked about nothing as we walked, stopping now and then to confirm we were still on the rails. It felt like 45 minutes. He checked his watch and went pale. "That's weird. It says 5. I shoved him. I said, "Your watch is busted," playfully. But the shadows were already long, longer than 45 minutes of walking should have made them. And some part of me, some animal part of me that hadn't yet learned to doubt itself, understood that the day had been eaten somewhere in the middle without either of us tasting it go. That was when I saw it. Off to the right, a quarter mile out, a mass denser than the 3 trees around it. The lines too clean, too deliberate, to be anything the forest had grown on its own. It became, as we approached, a building, then a church. Small, maybe 500 square feet. Windows intact, but caked with grime so thick it looked like the dirt. Then something, the glass itself had grown. A second secretion, a film on the outside. From inside rather than outside. A wooden plaque hung over the front door, its lettering worn to nothing, as though the name of the place had been sanded off on purpose by hands, or by something that didn't, or that did not work with hands at all. The front door wouldn't open. The back door let us in without a fight, which in retrospect felt less like luck and more like an invitation we should have read more carefully. Inside, a small office, a wooden desk, fixed to a wall, a fireplace, portraits of people standing before the same maroon backdrop, all of them looking down at us with this particular disapproval of the dead. Books in a language I've never seen. Their script crawling into patterns that hurt slightly to look at indirectly. as if the letters were not quite finished deciding what shapes they wanted to be in. The floor was thick with dirt. A pair of old shoes sat abandoned in the corner. The leather of them were gone and swollen, like something left out in the weather that didn't exist anywhere else in that room. He has found a list of names, 60 or so, all crossed out but one, under the heading Deepwood. He guessed plague. I didn't argue. Though even then something in me understood that whatever had crossed those names had not been a disease, in any sense of the word that usually means. That a disease does not normally leave a single name standing on purpose, like a chair left out for a guest expected to return. The ceiling came down while I was staring at one of those portraits. A young woman whose painted eyes seemed to track me, the way a damp stain tracks the corner of a room, always present, no matter where you stood. And I don't remember the fall. I remember being on my back across the threshold with my friend on top of me. In a strange, brief moment, in that half a second before the pain caught up to where my body felt unfamiliar with me, weighing wrong, as though something had been added to or subtracted from during the half second I'd lost consciousness. The office was sealed behind a wall of rotting debris. Our way out, gone. He said we'd break a window instead, like it was nothing. The chapel itself was worse. 8 rows of pews, rotting to the point where the wood had crumbled in our hands when we used the legs to stand or smash the windows. The light that come through afterward didn't seem to help. The room itself seemed to resist all forms of illumination. That way it held a breath, resist the air. As though brightness were a kind of trespass, the building was actively, slowly declining to permit. I think it wanted us. And at the front, where I assumed the podium was, or where it stood, was a statue of a crucifixion. The paint had worn from every part except the wounds, which were still wet a red that looked less like old pigment than something that had been simply never finished bleeding, wet, mobile, catching what little light there was in a way dried paint had no business catching it. The face alone kept its detail, every line intact across however many decades it watched us both with the same accusing eyes as portraits in the office, except worse, because this set of eyes seemed to know something specific about me that the portraits hadn't bothered to learn. I told my friend we needed to go, and quick. He didn't hear me, not really. He'd grown up, marinated in this religion his whole life. It wasn't going to leave without proof. He spent several long minutes photographing the statue while my skin crawled. In his own way, or his own small muted way, the crawl directly off my skeleton. When he wrapped his arm around the statue's shoulder for a photo, I felt something lurch in my own chest. Sympathetic. Wrong. Like my body had registered the contract before my eyes had even processed what he had touched. The front door had no lock, no handle, nothing. Just markings I didn't recognize, carved into a slab of wood that didn't bulge, no matter how hard we hit it. While I worked at that, Jamie found the hollow place in the floor and started digging out a trapdoor with his bare hands. And the dirt that came out from it stuck to his fingers in a way dirt shouldn't. Clean, long, thin threads like it was spider webs. It didn't want to leave from him. I sat down against the front pew. I put my head between my knees. While the panic finally arrived, late, enormous. The kind I hadn't felt in over a year. He talked me back up. 2 minutes, he said. 2 minutes. Pictures and then we'll leave. I don't know why I agreed. I've spent 20 years not knowing why I agreed. Only knowing that I'm glad in the smallest, most shameful corner of myself that whatever happened down there didn't happen to him alone. And I hate that corner of myself a little more every year. Heat came up out of that hole. Thick and wrong for a hole in the ground. And below it was a spiral staircase that had no business of existing under a building that size, descending into a dark that seemed to start lowering than the floor should have allowed. He went first, I followed, and the stairs went on longer than the building above could have contained. The heat climbed the whole way. The air grew thicker, enough to chew. At the bottom of the chamber, empty, but for a desk in the corner, twin to one upstairs, and a second statue. 12 feet of stone demon faced the staircase. We just come down, as though it had been waiting specifically for someone to use it. Horns, claws, a tail long enough to sweep the width of the room, forcing us to step over it. As we edged along the wall, our backs pressed to the stone, putting as much distance as the chamber would allow between us and the face neither of us could fully see from where we stood. I couldn't look away from it. And I couldn't make myself trust it. Not for a moment. Not with what I had already seen upstairs bleed. His voice came from across the room, almost playful, asking if I could believe this. I swung the flashlight up along the demon's flank to find him and clipped my own arm hard enough to drop it. It rolled under the desk. And in the dark that followed, I heard him yelp. I dropped to my knees, feeling blindly along the floor, my fingers brushing something that was neither dirt nor stone, and that withdrew from my touch for a half a second before I could decide what it was. I found the flashlight. I stood. I turned it toward I had last seen his lighter. And that's when whatever was left of my ordinary mind simply declined to continue functioning as it had before. The demon's head was beside him, inches away. It had turned, bent at some joint that stone has no right to have. to bring his face level with his. And his face was not aimed at him at all. It was aimed at me. I have tried in the years since to describe that face. And I want to be honest here in a way I haven't always managed to be with myself. It isn't that memory has gone. It's that my mind built a kind of scar tissue around that place where that memory lives. And every time I go looking for the actual shape of what I saw, I find only that scar, smooth, blank, refusing entry. As though some part of me had performed an urgent surgery over itself to hide whatever I saw. My body reacted before any thought had arrived to explain why. Something deep and old in my nervous system simply recoiled, total and involuntary. The way a hand pulls back from a flame just as the brain feels it burn. He noticed my flashlight shaking in my grip before he understood why. Turned and started screaming. And that scream was the thing that finally let me move. We took the stairs, 2 and 3 at a time, and I slipped, and we both went tumbling halfway down. And in that moment we heard stone grinding against stone above the sound of our own panic. It was moving fully, the floor itself groaning under a weight that shouldn't. Having been able to lift at all, we climbed the staircase, shook under something far larger than any of us as it was climbing behind us. Hard enough that I felt the impact travel up through the soles of my shoes and into the bones of my legs, a vibration. I didn't feel like it belonged to normal physics of footsteps so much as to something that was being delivered blow by blow directly into my skeleton. He shoved me into the hole first. He tried to slam the trap door, and it wouldn't move. The same wrongness of the front door, symbols on it, underside. We shoved together until I noticed the demon's silhouette cross the cone of our dying light from below. Closer now, it seemed, almost at the top. And he pulled me up and pointed me at the door we already knew wouldn't open. It didn't the first time, or the second. We tried the windows, too high, the rotting pews crumbled under our weight. The moment we tried to climb them, while the thundering of footsteps below grew louder and louder, I could feel it in my teeth, in the soft tissue behind my eyes, and the pressure that had nothing to do with the sound and everything to do with the proximity of something the world hasn't been built to hold. Horns rose out of the trapdoor's dark 3-foot hole from where it'd been setting only a minute before. I stood up without deciding. I understand what total and simple clarity is. That if its head came fully into the room and I saw its face again, whatever scar tissue in my mind had managed so far would not be enough. That there would be nothing left of me capable of running, so I ran at the door instead, every ounce of myself behind it, and felt it give the instant he hit it beside me. And we went through the broken threshold together and into the cooling dark outside. He had me on my feet and running before I could even process that we made it out. We ran for the tracks at full sprint. The thunder behind us, tracking through the trees, no matter how far we got. Footsteps that echoed wrong, too evenly, sparse. Through whatever was making them, didn't experience distance in the same way we did. Until, all at once, they stopped. They hadn't given up. They had simply arrived somewhere. And I had spent 20 years afraiding to guess war. It was full dark by then, getting cold fast, and I lost track of him for a second. I turned to find him sprawling across a rail, up and running again before I could ask if he was hurt. We ran until we physically couldn't, then jogged, and then walked, neither of us willing to be the one to say anything first. How long have we been on these tracks? His voice had an edge in it I never heard from him before. I looked at his wrist. His watch was gone. Not broken, not stopped, simply absent. The strap intact and empty, as if the watch itself had been quietly subtracted from his arm at some point neither of us had noticed. We agreed, out loud, deliberately. The way you agree on the story you already both know is a lie. That it must have been something undiscovered animal, hibernating, woken up by accident, words meaning nothing to a thing like that. I asked about the symbol of the doors anyway. If they'd been keeping something down there. And Jamie said, it was an animal. Words wouldn't matter to either of it. I let the thought sit there, hoping we would argue with it. We didn't. He didn't. I think some part of him already knew that no animal looked at a person the way that thing looked at me. Or him. Aware. Recognizing. Evaluating. And that no animal's release depends on two children clumsily running or ruining the locks that were meant to keep it there. We found the search party's flashlights half an hour later. He collapsed into his parents. I fell into my mother's arms, cried until I had nothing left. The police found us at 4 a.m, 3 hours after sunset, by our own accounting. We had spent less than an hour inside that church and lost 10 somewhere we never got to feel past. We told everyone we walked to the lake and gotten lost. We never mentioned Deepwood or the church or what waited beneath it. I left that town that Monday, 2 days early. He never come to say goodbye. I kept the police report with his name on it. The only proof I had left of him, and I never saw him again. Over the following year, the town came apart in my memory the way wet paper comes apart in your hands. Not all at once, but in a way that leaves you holding less of it every time you check. My parents stopped remembering we'd ever gone. And I taped the police report to the ceiling above my bed. So he would be the first thing I saw every morning, and the last thing I saw every night. A small, stubborn act of preservation against something I couldn't name. The town's website disappeared. The newspaper, both schools, my father, store, scrubbed clean from the company archive, as it was never opened. I searched public records for his full name for years and found nothing. I paid someone to search the records I wasn't supposed to have access to. He came back empty too. More unsettled by the absence than by